Hello, everybody. Welcome to another excellent edition of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense with myself and Sean. We're going to talk about something that's happened very recently in the wrestling world that, in our opinion, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so we're going to talk about it. We touched upon the subject briefly in a couple of other podcasts where the WWE have a deal with Saudi Arabia to promote some shows over there, like a 10-year deal. I believe originally it was a 10-year deal, and they got a lot of money for it, apparently. And this is when that started, 2017, I think it started. It was 2 years ago?
I believe so, because I think they did a couple of shows which weren't on the network or anything. Okay. And then I think maybe last year was the first year of them doing it on the network.
I can't remember if it was last year or like... but anyway, I think it's 2017 anyway. We've got at least a year out of it, for sure. It definitely happened last year. And there was some events on this year. It seems like they're doing like 2 a year.
Yep.
Which is interesting because, you know, if they were getting a lot of money to do a show, to do shows every 10 years, you'd be like, one's probably enough, right? And I say that because I watched the first show, and the people watching the show in Saudi Arabia didn't seem like they were that interested in it.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be strange to bring a show like that back, you know, twice a year. Whenever the first time they did it, it didn't seem like people kind of got it or were that interested in it to begin with, which is very interesting to try and understand that they drew a very big crowd. I believe the stadium was full.
But I don't think it was a paying crowd or anything. It was more like they kind of gathered people up to come and watch the show, sort of thing.
Exactly. I would have said it would be quite hard to fill a stadium full of people who don't care much for your product. But hey, you know, Saudi Arabia is a different place than over here, I suppose. So this has been going on for a while, and there was a little bit of controversy. Was it last year?
There was a journalist.
The journalist, yes.
I think his name was Jamal Khashoggi or Khashoggi, something like that, who was like a sort of Saudi dissident, like someone who was very outspoken against the royal family and sort of the oppressive regime they've got there, and like, you know, all the bad human rights records and stuff like that. So yeah, basically this guy, this journalist, went to a Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and pretty much, according to the CIA, pretty much as soon as he stepped through the front door, he was kind of accosted by all these guys who had been hired by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and basically just killed right then and there, like murdered and had his body dismembered. And the fact that it was so brazenly done is it kind of drew widespread condemnation. Brought all this like bad press for Saudi Arabia, and this was like weeks before, you know, WWE was supposed to go over to Saudi Arabia for their Crown Jewel show. So, needless to say, it didn't really reflect very well on WWE to go ahead with that show after all of this.
Yeah, it happened, and then their show was like a couple of weeks later, maybe even like a week or two later. They decided to go anyway because they were contractually obliged, I suppose. We avoided talking about it too much last year, although it was very suspicious and very ill-timed and probably not a good move. But they did it anyway, and they put on a show. And it was a very strange occurrence that... Because the journalist was an American citizen, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not sure if he was like of Saudi descent or anything, but he was an American citizen. And he is, this unfortunate thing happens, and then 2-3 weeks later, this giant American company goes over to Saudi Arabia and puts on a fun, family-friendly show.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very strange and suspicious. We'll cover that a little bit later because there's still more to this story. Then this year, they put on a show last week on Halloween.
Yes.
Appropriately enough, it was a very spooky time for all involved because, from what I heard, it's kind of hard to get the timeline in order, but from what I heard, there was some kind, and this is conjecture and hearsay, I guess, but this is what's been talked about, is that at some point, Vince McMahon or the company in general were owed money that was promised to them by the Saudis, and apparently because of that, the live feed for the show in Saudi Arabia was delayed by 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the facts are that the live feed was delayed by 40 minutes, and one possible reason for that has been this rumor that money was owed. And so Vince McMahon decided to pull the broadcast until things were settled, which is a very interesting way of doing business. You would imagine you wouldn't start the show if you haven't got paid for it. So that's kind of suspicious.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that that's not true. Obviously, they would say that's not true. But anyway, the show went on. I didn't watch it because I didn't watch it the last couple. Mainly because they're usually not that good, and two, I'm still a little bit miffed about the whole American journalist thing that we covered a moment ago. I'm very suspicious, and I don't really want to kind of support that too much. But afterwards, whenever the crew and all of the wrestlers and everybody was getting ready to go home, because they had cleverly booked a live SmackDown show for the day after. So they already that's not a good move. I would have thought to get all of these guys home from Saudi Arabia. They're going to be jet lagged and tired, and then they got to go and do a live show. That's hard, Clearly, these guys, the actual people, the wrestlers, the guys involved, they work very hard, and they must get jet lagged all the time, and it's tough going for these guys. So that kind of scenario probably wasn't sitting well with a lot of people, I imagine, that they had to fly all the way back and then go and do a live SmackDown show, and big smiles and put on a great event and everything. But at some point, when the wrestlers and the crew and everybody were on their plane getting ready to leave, there were some mechanical faults.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the story starts to get strange.
Yeah, well, because it wasn't just a mechanical fault. There was apparently, AJ Styles was saying, he was told there was a fuel truck which had been parked on the runway, and the guy who drives it wasn't there, and so they couldn't move it for a while. And then there's stuff because of the mechanical faults, the pilots kind of timed out. They could, they're only legally allowed to go for 24 hours at a time, and because of all the delays and stuff, they'd gone over that time limit, and then they had to find replacement pilots and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of reasons for these delays that we've kind of been told, but nothing kind of really makes sense.
Well, that was one thing that I heard, was that people have been reporting multiple reasons. They were we were told lots and lots of different reasons why the plane can't leave, which kind of makes sense because I get the 24-hour rule. You wouldn't want people flying the plane who aren't prepared for it, that makes sense that they'd have to rest it, because of all the delays. That kind of makes sense. But then, like, when you hear them all together, when there's lots of different reasons, and it almost sounds like people were just coming up with reasons.
Yeah.
Like, the plane wasn't leaving, so there had to be a reason for it. For example, the fuel truck being left there and the guy who runs it had to leave or whatever. Like, who leaves a fuel truck just lying there?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just time out. You don't go, well, that's my shift over, I'll just leave this here. Like, that's bizarre. That doesn't make any sense.
And not only that, but, like, why couldn't someone else just get in there and move it as well?
Right. Like, how is that an issue? I don't see how that one couldn't have easily been fixed. And also, the fact that the crew had to do the 24-hour, timeout business. Isn't there, like, a relief crew or anybody else available, to fly the plane? So that was strange. Vince McMahon and a couple of other people, like Brock Lesnar and Hulk Hogan and stuff, had, like, already chartered flights to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to get out of there. Other members of the crew, such as a lot of the guys who were going to be on SmackDown, had tried to charter a different flight to go home so that they could get to SmackDown in time. But for some reason, that one didn't work either. Or it was late, I think. I think that they did get it, but they didn't get home in time for SmackDown.
Yeah.
So, and then the other guys just had to wait, like, a whole day or something. They were put up in a hotel, and they were told to just wait until the next day, until there was a plane ready for them.
Yeah, and essentially it didn't get back to New York until, like, sometime on Saturday afternoon, so...
Yeah. So... This is a very strange scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rumors came out that the earlier kind of Vince McMahon pulling the show or delaying the show, or the live feed of the show because he hadn't got paid, was brought up again, and that perhaps the Saudi Arabian princes or royal family weren't happy with what went down and tried to sabotage the plane. Not sabotage the plane, that sounds wrong, but I mean, like, delay it or stop it from leaving, basically.
Yeah.
So that's what the rumors are now, is that there's been some kind of disagreement between Saudi Arabia and Vince McMahon, and that the wrestlers, the people that Vince McMahon needs to create his show, a live show that he's been putting on every week for God knows how long, 20, 30 years, essentially taken hostage. I mean, they weren't really.
No, it's not like there were, soldiers or people with guns or anything. No. They weren't being threatened or anything like that, but it was almost like a power play by the Saudi prince, like, sort of saying, well, if you're gonna, fuck with our show and, how we broadcast it, then we're gonna fuck with your show and, hold back all your talent.
Like a little kind of sabotage.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it seems like. So all of this was very strange. It doesn't really make sense why the Saudis wouldn't have paid Vince McMahon for the show. It doesn't make sense why Vince would have went ahead with the show if he hadn't got paid for it. Like, I heard they released their, like, quarter earnings very recently, and they only got paid for it very recently before the show, from what I heard. Or they got a payment
but not the full amount or something.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know that they got a payment shortly at some point before the show went ahead. So that's kind of strange. And then it gets even weirder because over the weekend everybody was talking about this. This is very suspicious, very strange. And then it gets even stranger because one of the old Spanish announce members,
Hugo Savinovich.
Let's call him Hugo.
Yeah, let's do that.
For the sake of simplicity, I would hate to offend anybody, but we don't have the names written down right in front of us. So I know his name is Hugo. So he no longer works for the company, but he was in contact with somebody who was on the show. And he had a lot of stuff to say about that. He kind of confirmed that money hadn't been paid, and that this was all kind of like a sabotage thing, like a power move, like you said, by the Saudi Arabians, and that the boys weren't happy about it, and it was all very, very strange. Kind of confirming what lots of people had said. Obviously, the talent themselves have done a lot of damage control and have pretty much tried to debunk that, saying that it was just mechanical problems. It is like it happens, and it does happen. That it's suspicious timing, but there it is. And I'm like, it is very suspicious timing. But everybody was talking about this, and not in a good way. And it's not the first time that people have been talking about this deal with Saudi Arabia, and not in a good way. Mm-hmm. So it's just more kind of negative press about this whole thing. And then, on Monday, the WWE released a statement, very short statement, that said that they have decided to increase the length of their deal.
Well, actually, they said that the deal had been expanded,
okay.
Which was pretty strange, because I believe the deal was due to run until 2027 anyway, mm-hmm. But they kind of announced that as like the new expansion date, so that hadn't changed at all.
Right, it was still for like 10 years.
Yeah, and then they also said that as part of this like new expanded deal, they'd start including a second annual large-scale event in Saudi Arabia, which, again, doesn't make sense because they have been doing 2 large shows there for the last couple of years. So
right.
I don't know what the point of that press release was, or like what it was like actually touting, because it seemed like it was essentially saying, what the deal already was.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. This is all very, very suspicious. Mm-hmm. And I felt like we should kind of discuss it a little bit, because it's very, very strange. Now, a lot of this is kind of rumors, but, it's coming from, like, sources related to the WWE, so it kind of makes sense. All of this. And, like we've covered before, Saudi Arabia doesn't have a great image right now. And the idea of them going over there and putting on these shows was supposed to like bridge a gap between the East and the West, and to show that Saudi Arabia is becoming a more progressive place to be, and that it's not as oppressive as it used to be, and that it's changing, and that it's becoming different, which totally flies in the face of what happened last year with that journalist.
Yeah.
Because that proved that, things aren't changing as quickly. Like, for example, they were able to put on the first women's match in Saudi Arabia. Natalya and Lacey Evans, right? Which they can tout as a big deal. Look how progressive they are. But you have to weigh that up against the fact that Saudi Arabia killed a guy last year and got away with it.
Yeah, well, not only that, but they still kind of punish people for homosexuality. They discriminate against other religions. They still have like public beheadings and crucifixions and like torture their prisoners and stuff like that. So this, it might be sort of like a nice public, hey, we're making these positive changes and stuff, but Jesus,
it's not like a big leap. It's not like a big progressive leap like they're making it out to be. Whenever all of this stuff that Saudi Arabia has been accused of, they're still doing it. Mm-hmm. They're still like up to just strange things, and some very like illegal and not good things. And so it's just like a little drop in the ocean. Like, oh, we had a women's match. I'm like, cool, get them to stop killing people. Do that one, do something about the regime. I mean, I suppose it's fairly hypocritical to get America to get another country to change their oppressive regime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whenever, but that reminds me, I read something very interesting the other day, and I wanted to bring it up now, or in this podcast, just as a talking point. Because you know what I'm like with my crazy hypotheticals, right?
Okay.
I'm very good at them, and usually you're very quick to debunk them. But I bring them up as a point of like to think it over. You know, because I always bring them up. They sound crazy, but they're also not outside the realms of possibility in my head, right? So, I read a thing, like, maybe a few days ago. Maybe, what day is today? Wednesday? We're recording this on Wednesday. Maybe on Monday or Tuesday, I read something where, I want to get this right, where Jared Kushner, is that his name?
Yeah.
Jared Kushner, who works very closely with the Trump organization.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe he's married to
Ivanka.
Yeah, one of Trump's daughters.
Yeah.
So, because of that, he somehow finds himself in the White House. That's not how that works, but that's for a whole separate podcast. From what I heard, and again, conjuncture and everything, but I believe he was like recorded on the phone or overheard on the phone or anything like this. Actually, I don't know if you've heard this. I heard this, and of course it's not big news because why would it be? But that he basically gave the go-ahead to Saudi Arabia for them to arrest this guy, the journalist.
Yeah.
He was the one that said, "Yeah, you can do that."
Well, he's supposed to be like the American sort of Middle East peace envoy kind of thing. He's supposed to be the guy who's going over and building a relationship with the countries over there. So that kind of doesn't surprise me. That, especially, I mean, we don't want to get too political with this, but like being part of the Trump organization and stuff, where they don't seem to have the highest morals when it comes to selling other people out for their own benefit. So
right, exactly. Now that's a good point. They also look after their own.
Mm-hmm.
They're they take loyalty very seriously.
Yeah.
Which I feel like Saudi Arabia do as well.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why I think that they got annoyed at Vince McMahon, because they're like, we had a deal, right? And Vince is like, well, you didn't do your end of the bargain, you know, and so they delayed the plane or whatever. But my talking point is Donald Trump and Vince McMahon are good friends.
Yeah.
This is well known. This Saudi Arabia deal happened in 2017 after Donald Trump was president. Do you think that there was some kind of help from the White House to get that deal?
Possibly, because I know Trump and Mohammed bin Salman has they have like a relationship. Like, you know, Trump invited him to the White House. He's talked him up lots and stuff. So I can see him not necessarily playing the middleman, but maybe helping, you know, put the two of them in bed together, sort of thing. So it wouldn't surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, Trump is keen for this WWE deal to go ahead to kind of help improve relations and stuff, and so he can kind of say, oh yeah, it's fine that we're doing deals with this MBS guy, because, you know, he's progressive. He's, you know, trying to westernize Saudi Arabia and bring stuff like wrestling to the country, and you know, use that as, I guess, an excuse to kind of get into bed with him as well.
Right, like that's what I thought. Which, again, is strange that he wouldn't publicize that more. Because you would think with a guy like Donald Trump, who's very big-headed and very happy to make himself look like the good guy,
yeah,
that he wouldn't kind of trump that out and promote that, the fact that he was able to, maybe not, like you said, maybe not himself personally broker a deal, but like I feel like this deal probably wouldn't have happened if Trump wasn't in charge.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
And I think the only argument against that is, like you say, the fact that he hasn't sort of patted himself on the back, because any excuse to do that, he'll take it. So
right. So that's what I find very suspicious. I feel like there is some kind of Trump connection, and he is very interested in trying to make Saudi Arabia look good, which is because Saudi Arabia have lots of money.
Yeah, and obviously, if there's one thing Donald Trump likes, it's lots of money.
And if one of his best friends or good friends is getting money from Saudi Arabia, don't you think it's possible that Donald Trump is also getting some of this money?
Well, yeah, because I'm sure Vince and Linda have contributed to his election and re-election campaigns and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's all starting to come together now, isn't it?
We're kind of getting into this dangerous territory now, where we could go down all these sort of conspiracy theory rabbit holes and never come back up again. So
you're right in that I don't want to make things too political.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I want to point out that there seems to be a suspicious connection between this whole deal and the White House. And we can gloss over that. We can move on. I'm happy to do that, but I want to make it clear that I feel like, and not for the first time, that there is a very suspicious deal going on with a country in the Middle East that has lots of money and Donald Trump. I feel like these are related somehow, and that also gives me cause for concern. But we shall keep things wrestling based, because we are a wrestling based podcast.
Yes. So how much of this story do you think is actually accurate then? Like, how much do you buy into the conspiracy theory?
I think it makes sense. A lot of it makes sense. Like, a lot of the stars align for these stories, I think it's very suspicious that all of these failures and problems would happen to the plane at once, while all of the crew are on the plane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a mighty coincidence. But that's not to say that it couldn't just actually happen like that. But it does seem very, very, very suspicious that this all happened on this day when these guys were all leaving and all had somewhere very important to be. And this all happened after the rumors came out that Vince McMahon and people in the Saudi Arabia regime had some kind of disagreement over money. It all kind of adds up, and obviously I get that a lot of the guys like Corey Graves and AJ Styles and stuff have been very vocal about trying to calm the waters and make it seem like it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal, because this is the second year. If it's been going on since 2017, this is what, the second or third? Well, it'd be the third full year that they've been doing things in Saudi Arabia, and constantly, every time they do this, we've heard stories about how people weren't happy about going anyway. There's been lots of reports of people just, people don't even go. Daniel Bryan didn't go, and John Cena aren't going because they have, a moral responsibility and they have taken a stand. And to be fair, they're in a position in that company to do so.
Yeah.
There are other people who aren't that lucky and want to go and, want a good payday, which is totally fair. I understand that. They work very hard and then they deserve, that kind of extra payday. But the fact that constantly, since this has started, people have not been very, very happy about the whole deal. About having to go over there and having to do that and then coming back again. It seems like there's been a lot of kind of negative reports about this anyway. And then last year, whenever the incident with the journalist happened, people were still very like uncomfortable about going over, but they had to anyway. It feels like the longer this goes on, the less and less people are going to want to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is why it's kind of mind-boggling that they would release a press release that said, we're going to extend our relationship with Saudi Arabia and we're going to keep doing these events. Because I can't imagine a lot of people want to do them anymore.
No, I mean, certainly I saw on Twitter, like, Carl Anderson saying he was never going back. I'm pretty sure, like, Luke Harper, Curtis Axel, guys like that, all kind of suggested that they have no interest in doing it again. It's, it's like you say, who is going to be on these shows if they keep doing them? Because you can't force the talent to do it, surely.
Right, like, there's a point, and I really don't want to keep bringing it back to Donald Trump, but the thing is, there's a point where, like, money just isn't a good enough motivator. And I feel like maybe some people don't get that. Wink, wink, Donald Trump. But, like, you can't solve all your problems by saying, we'll give you loads of money to do this.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. And if we're only 2 or 3 years into this deal, are people going to be, they've still got 7 years to go. Are people going to be that invested? Are people going to be, like, dreading that whole thing? It's not like doing a tour of, like, any other kind of country. It's not like going to Japan.
Yeah.
Doing a tour over there, or the UK, or the rest of Europe, or anything like that. It's a very different thing. It's these big shows that are being promoted with, like, pomp and circumstance, but they're not big because they're not special. There's nothing to the shows, It's not like remember, was it last year they did, like, the big Australia Super Show?
Yeah,
and they made it seem like a big deal because it probably was. Australia is a good market for wrestling fans, and the problem with it is, they're so far away that it's very hard for the WWE to go over there consistently. So for them to have a big show like that was a big deal. On both sides, it's a big deal for people in Australia because then they get to see a big show once a year or whatever, and it's big for the WWE because they get to go over to Australia, they get to scout for other potential talent, and they get to expand their own fan base in front of an audience that truly cares about the product.
Yeah.
But that's not what they get in Saudi Arabia. The deal is, it seems to me, it's just like strictly a money thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to be too critical of the crowd in Saudi Arabia because by all accounts, like they have been sort of getting more into it the more shows they've held over there. Like from the few clips I did see of the latest Crown Jewel, there was quite a few cases of the fans being, like, well into what they were seeing. So it seems like it is like a slow progression to kind of them understanding what wrestling is and what they're supposed to do as well. Because I think by the time the first show rolled out, they hadn't even been airing WWE in the country for that long, so it was all really new to them.
Isn't it totally bizarre that they would go and put on regular shows over there all the time?
Yeah.
Isn't it totally bizarre that they happen to broker a deal with one of the richest countries over in the Middle East for a deal to put on a show that at the time not a whole lot of people were exposed to, and that they didn't have a clear market for?
It also kind of explains why they were like the Saudis were expecting to see, like, Yokozuna and stuff.
Yeah, like they specifically asked if Yokozuna was going to be at the show.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we'll do our best, but don't hold your breath on that one. Yes, very, very. the thing about it is, like, we're only 2 or 3 years into this, and it's just the more it goes on, the more suspicious and strange all of this is. You know, like, if this thing that happened last week was just a thing that happened, that would be fine. You know, coincidence. But you gotta remember last year with the journalists and all the talent just not being that excited to go over and to begin with, and coming home, I heard that, you know, people after the first or second show or whatever, people just were not that enthused about going over again, which is not what you want from year one of a 10-year deal. For your talent to not be interested in doing it anymore. So it's just all very strange. And it makes me interested to see what happens next year, because how are they going to top this? You know, what fucking weird thing is going to happen next year? And also, do you think that the talent are thinking the same thing? Are they like, you know, are they just going to be like, this is getting too weird? Not simply that Saudi Arabia has questionable kind of, you know, ruling techniques that they do, but also the fact that every year something strange happens over there. At some point, some of the guys are going to be like, I don't want to do this just because I value my own safety and I don't want to know what happens next, you know?
Yeah, I think that's going to play a huge factor into it going forward, because if, let's say, everything that happened this time is exactly how people have been speculating, it was all sort of deliberate, you know, attempt by the Saudis to kind of stop them from leaving and stuff. What's to say that they won't, you know, next time something goes wrong in the deal, decide to kind of make an example out of a wrestler? Say, like, they accuse, I don't know, let's say, like Roman Reigns of having gone out and got drunk in public or something, and so now he's arrested and he's in a Saudi prison, and he's not going to be allowed back into the US at all. And then all of a sudden, you've got like one of your top stars literally held hostage, and you know, who knows what they might do, because this is the kind of country it is, and the kind of rules and laws that they have, that you're taking a risk every time you go over there.
Right, like, I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility at all for something like that to happen. Maybe not with Roman Reigns, but like, you know, that was just an example. Like, they could do that. They could just go, oh, he's been accused of this, and we just say that that's what happened. I'm like, well, that's, and because they're in their country, you can't really do nothing about it. You know, you can say, no, that's not true, but they're like, well, this is Saudi Arabia, you're in our country, we say this is what happens, here's this guy's locked up, you know, what are you going to do about it? Like, it feels like it's going to end up getting messier.
Yeah.
I feel like the talent must figure that out by now. They're like, it's going to get strange. You know. Well, do you believe all of these rumors and this kind of conjecture and stuff?
Well, usually when it comes to stuff like this, I'm all over it. I love a good rumor and a good conspiracy theory as well. But the more that I've kind of heard about the situation, the less I sort of believe it, I guess. Like, there's certain elements that I kind of think, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like the whole Vince, like, holding up the broadcast to try and get the money that he's owed, that just smacks of like 80s Vince, you know, when WWF was expanding and sort of taking over the country in terms of wrestling. I could see him doing that kind of thing back then, and so it kind of makes sense that he'd do it now. But at the same time, this is such a cash cow deal for WWE. I don't think he'd want to sort of jeopardize that and, you know, do anything which would end up costing the company like $500 million or whatever it's going to be. So and then you get to stuff like the whole Vince supposedly, hopping on a plane and getting out of there as quickly as he can. Yeah, okay, so I can understand the feelings of abandonment and how that could play into the speculation from all the wrestlers and workers and stuff, but Vince does that all the time. Like after a show, it's not like this was a special occasion where he just so happened to leave straight away. He like always, according to Corey Graves, he'll immediately hop on a plane and head to Stamford or to the next show or whatever. So
right.
It's nothing out of the ordinary there. And yeah, I don't know. To me, I think it's just a situation which is, it's just been blown out of proportion, partly through the guys on the roster who have been left behind and feel like they've been betrayed almost, and or they're sort of pawns in a larger game. But it's just speculation, and until there's some sort of solid, concrete proof, then I'm inclined to think it's a situation that has kind of blown out of all proportion.
Well, I get the Vince McMahon thing as well. I understand that. He's a busy man. He's the head of the company. He has a lot of things on his plate. It makes sense that he would be the first one to leave because he has, other business to attend to.
Yeah.
That I totally get. I don't see him as abandoning his troops or anything like that. I don't think that's the case at all. But like you said, you can totally see why people would make it seem like the wrestlers were being kind of kept there on purpose and used as some kind of revenge scenario or something like that. It's too coincidental for it all to not be true. Well, no, I phrased that incorrectly. But there's too many coincidences going on at the same time for there not to be something up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't 100% know what it is, but I think that the show being delayed by 40 minutes could have been a mechanical failure. And then, after that, whenever all of the boys were scheduled to leave, coincidentally, the plane happens to not work, and then there's a fuel truck on there, and then everybody has to get off because the crew can't leave because they've been on for 24 hours or whatever. All of this, plus, there were other reasons that we don't know about. From what I heard, people were given multiple reasons as to why the planes weren't leaving, and it just seemed like they were coming up with excuses, and it's way too coincidental for there not to be something going on, right? That's just the way I think. It's all very just too suspicious. Usually I'm not the kind of guy who jumps all over conspiracy theories and stuff, but I just don't get how all of this. It doesn't look good. And then them releasing that weird statement 2 days afterwards that says they've expanded their partnership, but give no indication as to what that expansion is, or kind of give any indication of anything at all. Like you said, they just repeated information that we already knew. Have knew for 2 years, because they've been putting on shows for 2 shows a year, this year and last year, maybe 2017, I can't remember, but they've already been doing this, and we already know it's on for 10 years. So it's a weird way to see a face. It doesn't all add up,
Well, I think part of the reason for the press release might have been because of their stock taking a hit after the latest sort of financial reports came out, I think last week. So maybe that played into that rather than the whole Saudi Arabia situation. So it was a weird sort of timing to bring it out and to especially try and hype it up, considering all of the speculation about what really went on over there.
Do you think that them releasing a statement so quickly after that, like, it does further harm to like the morale? Like, can you imagine like that kind of shit show going down? Like, you're in the middle of it. You're part of the crew. You're tired as hell. You want to get back home. You can't. You're there for. You're in a place you don't really want to be for longer than you have to be, and you don't know what's going on. And it feels like you're part of a power struggle. You're not sure what's going on. You finally do get home after you miss a show that you should have been on, and you kind of, you just had to miss it because of other people's machinations. And then 2 days later, after this shit show, the company that you work for say, our relationship with this country has never been better, everything's great. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't you be like, dude, come on? Like, that I would take that as a bit of a slap in the face.
Oh, definitely a huge slap in the face. And I imagine like these wrestlers, like we said, they've got no interest in going back and going through that sort of hell all over again, and that here they are, like, being told, well, this whole situation isn't going away anytime soon, so get used to it, suckers.
Exactly. It seems like they're kind of doubling down and going this, and like, it's pretty clear that a lot of people aren't having a good time with it. They're very unhappy with having to do it, and for them, shareholders are not. I mean, for them to double down and go, our relationship's great, we're gonna have a great time, we're definitely coming back next year, our relationship has been extended, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. Like, the people doing the work, probably, I can't say that they're happy about that.
No.
It's just all very, very strange, and it doesn't make any sense. Basically, I don't know, man. This is the weirdest one we've had to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
I think because, like, while a lot of it does seem like conjecture, and rumors and stuff, like, we're not just dealing with stupid storylines anymore.
This is real life.
Actual real life being fucking weird, and as much as we don't want it to make it political, what happened last year with the journalist and then the WWE going over there 2 weeks later made it political and made it big news, which was negative news, not good news for the company. And then this year, more like, if they released that statement on Monday because their stocks were going down, or because of like shareholder, like, shareholders being very suspicious about it. See, the shareholders kind of been fucking happy about what went down last year.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy bad negative press, and it's not getting any better, and it's creating a lot of unease with lots of people. Like, the people who work there feel uneasy because some of them probably feel obligated to do it. Because you'll hear a lot of people trying to justify it and say, well, we're just doing our job. Our job is to be entertainers, and we should be able to entertain people across the world. That is true. But at the same time, you know that they can't be happy about doing a lot of this stuff. Which is evident by people like Daniel Bryan and John Cena taking a stand against going over there, because it's a very different country with very different rules, and it's just not... It's a very messy place to be caught up in, if we may go back to your Roman Reigns scenario. Something like that could totally happen, and it's just not a good place for, like, people. I can't imagine they feel too safe being over there, and this isn't a good thing to put your employees through, and it's not good to make it seem like they're obligated to do it, because by them releasing that press release, as nonsensical as it was, it makes it very clear that the company is still, despite all the bad press and despite all the negative feedback from fans and from their own staff of workers, that this relationship is going to continue.
Yeah.
And it's just all bad news. And you know, people aren't, like, we're not watching those shows on the network.
Nope.
So people so then you also have the fans who aren't psyched about this at all, who also don't support the fact that the WWE are working that closely with Saudi Arabia, and are conflicted because there are people who very much enjoy the product and enjoy NXT and enjoy all of this stuff, but at the same time feel conflicted with very strange political things that are actually happening in real life regarding the company and regarding this corrupt country. And it's not fair on them, and it's not on us, and you could say pay money for the fucking show. Mm-hmm. It's not fair to put people through that, and it's not fair to put the talent through that. And it's if it's all just for money, it's very, very bad. It's you would think that would do more harm, but of course, when it comes to shares and stocks and shareholders and shit like that, none of that makes any difference because it's just numbers that matter. So, you know, but I don't know. I think it's a bad time all around. It's not good for. It's not good much. And again, once again, I hate to make it political allegory, but it's not good for anybody except for the guys at the top.
Yeah.
It's not good for anybody except for the guys making lots of money. It's stupid to put people through that, and it's not fair. It's so. I don't know what to make about this whole situation. Like, the only thing that I know for sure, like I said, is that it's just not going to get any better.
Well, to be fair, I don't think either of us are going to be watching any of these shows either. So, like, you know, hopefully if the audience kind of dwindles and doesn't watch it on the network or whatever, then they might.
That's not going to make a goddamn difference because people still pay for the network.
Yeah, I guess, but they can tell like how many people watch the shows though,
but it doesn't matter because they can still make that money back from going to Saudi Arabia. You know, like, it really doesn't matter. And what's weird about it is, like, they did that title change at Saudi Arabia, which I didn't watch because I think I've talked enough about Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt to last a lifetime. It's bizarre that they would do a title change like that on that show, just because they gotta know people aren't gonna watch it.
Yeah.
And for them to pull that and as if that should be a reason for us to watch it, like, to follow up one of the shittiest main events of all time by saying, here's this thing that you're morally opposed to and probably will suck anyway. Now you have to watch it, or you have to pay attention to it because something actually major happened for once. It's not fair. But I mean, like, the whole strange nature of this deal with Saudi Arabia, and the fact that, like you said, that is a regime that is very cruel and can be very cruel. Killed a journalist last year, and they're very oppressive, especially when it comes to women and how they're regarded, and, you know, gay people and how they're regarded. It makes people seem uneasy about supporting that company when 3 years ago they wouldn't have.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just not fair, and I don't like it. I think overall the point is that this weekend has been a good highlight as to how strange this whole Saudi Arabia deal has been. And, you know, it just keeps getting worse and worse, or stranger and stranger. And you know, it just got to a point where I felt like we had to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, because, I mean, it really just doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't. This is something that we needed to talk about. And I think that it's something that lots of people need to talk about more. It's so strange that business goes on. Not only does business go on as usual, this looks like one of the best Survivor Series in years. It's like a total 180. Do you know what I mean? Like a total flip. Like their product was getting slated recently. Cough Loudly, Hell in a Cell, Cough Loudly, whatever the fuck happened at the Saudi Arabia show. They were not looking good. And now Survivor Series, which is traditionally, it's been one of the big five, but also not been one of the, big four, I guess, right?
Yeah. But it has been downplayed a lot in recent years.
It's not been one that they've done a very good job of promoting or making a big deal of. And suddenly, out of nowhere, it looks amazing. Is that a coincidence, or is that because they know that they're going to be subject to a lot of scrutiny after this particularly horrendous Saudi show and have decided to go full throttle?
Well, I think part of it is to do with AEW as well. So, especially with the fact that AEW has been beating NXT in the ratings every week so far, and it's always been beating WWE in terms of buzz as well. So, this whole situation with Survivor Series to try and bring NXT in as a third brand, it just mixes things up a lot and gives us something new, because it's always been, for the last 10 years or whatever, it's always been Raw versus SmackDown, and it gets a bit old after seeing it that many times. So bringing NXT into the mix and bringing all these fresh matches, because a lot of the guys on the NXT roster haven't had a chance to have matches against the main roster, like having Adam Cole against Daniel Bryan last week and Seth Rollins this week. These are the kind of matches that people want to see, because it is fresh and new and exciting. And yeah, I guess it's all part of this plan to kind of elevate NXT and make it as a legitimate third brand, I guess.
Isn't it bizarre that they have had NXT on a major network for a month now? Three weeks at least, right?
Oh, it's more than that. I'd say it's about
beginning of October,
6 or 7.
Yeah, maybe the end of September, beginning of October. So they've had it going for a while, and only now have they thought about actually promoting those guys on the show that they already know that people watch. You know what I mean? Before that, they were just NXT's here, it's on a channel, right? Because people who watch Raw and SmackDown casually or whatever the fuck aren't going to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to have a reason to watch NXT because they don't know anything about NXT. You bring these guys up with a buzz and, put them on TV and say, hey, these guys, the guy who just beat Daniel Bryan and the guys who are beating the fuck out of Seth Rollins, you can only see them on NXT on this channel, da-da-ya. Why wouldn't they have done that weeks ago?
Yeah.
It's just
it's the same with, bringing in sort of main roster talent for NXT as well, to sort of give that a bit of a ratings boost. I'm surprised they haven't done that yet, but I'm sure after, the angle that we've seen, over the past couple of days with NXT invading SmackDown and Raw, that we'll see a bit of that on tonight's NXT. That I'm sure there'll be some Raw SmackDown involvement in the show.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see Roman Reigns as NXT champion. People are gonna love that. They're gonna love
that. Dear, don't even joke.
Can you imagine Brock Lesnar being NXT champion?
Yeah,
they're gonna love that. Is there anything else you want to say about this entire bizarre Saudi Arabia situation?
Not really. I guess the whole situation is just so weird and kind of worrying, but you can't blame the wrestlers for any of it. So hopefully they're getting compensated a hell of a lot for being put through that bullshit.
I would hope that they are getting compensated a lot. Especially after this one. They just totally deserve it. That's a lot of bullshit. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. with regards to the Saudi Arabia deals and the shows they put on. So we'll see how that goes. And next time we'll have a much cheerier podcast, I think. Be much more optimistic. But yes, thank you guys for listening. We will see you in the next episode.